Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's take a look at using date, time, and duration values in numbers. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of more than 1,000 supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about the Patreon campaign, join us, and get exclusive content and course discounts. Now usually in numbers when you have values, they're just regular numbers. Sometimes those numbers represent money. Other times you've got labels for things. But occasionally you're going to use values like dates, times, and even durations. These work differently than regular numbers, especially when it comes to performing calculations on them. So a typical date value would look something like this. It's just the month, day, and year. And of course, depending on the part of the world you're in, you may actually see this as day, month, and year rather than month, day, and year. If you look at this right here, you'll see the actual value here at the bottom. So you want to look for the date value in this case here. If you see something else, then perhaps Numbers is interpreting what you've typed as a label and not an actual date. Now you can also include times. So I can do a date like this and also a time like that. And now you can see here the actual value shows you the date and the time. And I can work with the formats here as well, changing the time format and the date format to show it like I want. It's important to realize that dates and times are the same type of value. When you say February 2nd, 2022, you're really saying February 2nd, 2022 at midnight. If you include a time, then it's not midnight, it's that specific time, like 8 a.m. right here. Now typically you cannot perform calculations on times. There are exceptions we'll look at in a few minutes. A time is basically just a label. So if you have a spreadsheet that's showing the amount of items sold in a day, you may have a label that's in one column that has the date. It identifies that row as sales belonging to that date. If each row represents a specific sale, then you may have a date and time of that specific sale. So we just use these to organize and to know what each row is representing. We're not using them for calculations. So while dates and times are moments in time, durations are lengths of time. For instance, a duration may be something like 3 days. How would you enter 3 days in numbers? Well, there's special notation for doing that. You would type 3 and then the letter D. That represents days. And when I hit return, you can see it's not treating that as a label. That would be left justified. It's treating it as a duration. If I select it, it doesn't say text down here. It says actual 3D, 3 days. There are other letters you could use as well. For instance, 6S is 6 seconds. 7M is 7 minutes. 8H is 8 hours. We've seen days already. Something like 2W is 2 weeks. You could also have something like 400 ms, which represents milliseconds. You can combine these any way you want. So for instance, you can have 2 weeks and 4 days like that. You could have 5 hours, 6 minutes, and 23 seconds like that. There are no months or years because months and years aren't consistent lengths of time. Months can range from 28 to 31 days and years can be 365 or 366 days. Only weeks, days, hours, minutes, seconds, and milliseconds are consistent units of time. Now you can perform calculations on durations very easily. You can add and subtract them. So for instance, if I have 7 seconds here and I have 5 seconds here, I can have a formula that adds one and then the other. And the result will be 12 seconds. I can also subtract. So I can subtract one from the other and you can see 7 seconds minus 5 seconds is 2 seconds. And you could do this with any number of units. 1 hour and then minus 5 seconds. The result is 59 minutes, 55 seconds. I could do, say, 5 days and then subtract from that 2 days to get 3 days. Or I could subtract from that 12 hours to get 4 days, 12 hours. Now you can't multiply durations. That doesn't make sense. Multiplying something like, say, 3 days times 2 days doesn't get you 6 days. It gets you technically 6 days squared, which doesn't make sense. But numbers will figure out what you mean. So if I do multiplication like that, You can see it gives me the answer 6, but it gives me a little warning there. The proper thing to do would be to multiply a duration by a real number. So 3 days times 2 will give me 6 days. Now I said before you can do some calculations on times. And that's when you use a duration as the other part of the calculation. For instance, if I had a date like this and maybe a specific time and I wanted to add to that 5 hours, I could. So I could do 5h here and then the formula of this time plus this duration will give me February 2nd at 1 p.m., 5 hours after 8 a.m. I could also subtract and see that 3 a.m. was 5 hours earlier. I could do all sorts of things. Like for instance, change this to subtracting 3 days. So I can see January 30th was 3 days earlier. But what if I wanted to calculate the next month, 1 month after this time? Well, I could do 30 days and then do addition here. But that's not going to give me the next month because February doesn't have 30 days. It actually is off by 2 days. So how would you do that? Well, there are special functions to help in situations like this. If I start typing a formula here and then I look at date and time functions, I'll see all these great functions that work with dates and times. So let's look at the eDate function. The eDate function is what we want right here. It will do a calculation using a month offset. So I could start with this date here and say I want 1 month offset from it. You could also use the date diff function to get the difference between 2 dates. That will give you something better than adding or subtracting. If I do subtraction, I take this date minus this date, then I'm going to get that it's 4 weeks. I can format that here using custom units and see it's 28 days difference. But what I really want to get is the number of months that's different. Well, I can't divide by 30 or 31. I don't know how many days are going to be in the month as these values change. But I can, instead of using regular subtraction, use date diff. I can take the start date, the first one, take the end date here, and then choose a calculation method. In this case, I'm going to choose months. And now I'm going to get that it's 1 month different. So look through all of the different functions that handle dates and times here and see what could be useful to you. Read the descriptions, look at the examples, try some out for yourself in a sample table. There are also a bunch of functions that have to do with duration. Most of these have to do with converting a duration to a specific value, like say the exact number of minutes and giving you that as a numerical value rather than a special duration value. And a quick look at formats here. Formats for dates are pretty straightforward. You see the different date formats here, the different time formats here. You could of course always go to create custom format if you want. Durations are a little trickier. We're less familiar with those. The basic styles are to use either just a letter or a word like weeks there. But you could also select custom units and select the units you want. For instance, if I said I don't want days, then it's going to show me only hours and minutes. So I get 77 hours as opposed to 3 days, 5 hours. And also if you go to automatic units you can select just the number and then it's going to put colons between things. It doesn't make as much sense when you've got things like days, but it makes more sense when you've got just hours, minutes, and seconds. So that shows you hours and minutes and that's something we're used to seeing. If you switch to that format you'll see the actual value shows you that format there at the bottom. So now it's easier maybe to type things. Like for instance I could do 9 hours, 15 minutes, and 45 seconds like that. And it understands that that's what it is. I could switch over to the regular style like that to check to see exactly what it is. So I hope you found this useful. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, click the thumbs up button below to let me know. I publish new tutorials each weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out.